T.A.G. Very nice, very evil.
Yeah, that's tag shit.
Free fall as I dive through the kaleidoscope in my mind. No rope up to climb. Gotta remind myself that I'm fine. Mama, I don't really.
What up, Tag Nation? It's your boy ScooterRay, and I'm here with another episode of NXT.A.G. You know, we're getting on. We're on the road once again to Battleground. That's the next PLE. It's at the end of the month on the 25th, and we're building. We're building towards that show. We're building towards, you know, the matches. You know, after tonight's episode, we have 3 matches set for Battleground, and yeah, and don't worry, I will address the NXT releases, but I'm going to do it in a separate video because yeah, it deserves to be discussed a little bit more in depth than just mentioning the names and going on. So it will be a companion video to this one where I will discuss the releases that happened in NXT in their own separate video. But this night opens up with the 6-man tag of TNA champ Joe Hendry, NXT tag champs Hank and Tank, them belly bandits versus 3 members of Dark State. And tonight we get Osiris Griffin, Cutler James, and Dion Lennox, and Saquon Sugars is on the outside doing what Saquon does, and that's cause havoc and chaos. Not havoc and or chaos. Nope. He's causing both. And this was a pretty okay, solid match. Nothing to the big thing going in this match was the fact that Joe Hendry was going to be wrestling. And you know, but it was nothing that was like you know, but pretty solid match overall. The match broke down when Trick Williams eventually came out, pulled Joe Hendry out. Him and Joe Hendry just fight. So Hendry just abandons his partners in essence. And I can't remember which one of Hank and Tank suffers the dark bomb. That's what I'm gonna call it until we get a official name. But they suffer that triple power bomb, aka the dark bomb. 1, 2, 3. Dark State gets the dub. I mean, that's pretty much. Now, before I was mentioning this whole thing with Dark State and how they need to be booked and this, that, and the third, at this point, we kind of need to start seeing them more in one-on-one situations too. Because we're seeing them in 6-mans or tag or regular tag teams, and I think it's about time we start seeing them individually. Excuse me, sorry. I think it's about time we start seeing these gentlemen individually now. So that way we can kind of establish them too as threats more than just, you know, quote unquote gang warfare. That I think it's about time we see these gentlemen have some one-on-one matches with some people here and there. I don't know if they're gonna say that, hey, due to Dark State winning, they may get a tag team title shot. It would not surprise me, considering where the tag team landscape is at the moment. And if they feel like Hank and Tank needs to be on the Battleground card, I can see them go ahead and saying, hey, Hank and Tank are going to defend against 2 members of Dark State. Now, I don't think Dark State will come out on top, but I can see it being a tag team title match, especially now since Fraxium is on SmackDown. Congrats to them. Fraxium is on SmackDown. They're now officially 2-0 on SmackDown. So I can see potentially Dark State being, I guess, Hank and Tank's opponents, maybe at Battleground or maybe on a show leading up to Battleground. But yeah, After that, there was a moment backstage where Carmen Petrovich was talking to Thea Hale. And then eventually Jada comes up and was like, "Oh my God, Thea, you so annoying. Carmen, you this, that, and third." And then eventually later on it's going to lead to a match between Carmen and Jada. Then the next match we get Zarya versus Kalani Jordan. And essentially this match was Zarya kind of stepping up and stepping in front of Kalani, saying, "Oh, how she wants title shots and blah 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 rah rah rah." So it kind of leads to Zarya basically saying, "Well, Kalani, if you can beat me, you get a title shot." Now, the way the match broke down, I didn't see what caused Soul to kind of save Kalani from something. But then it kind of led to a moment where Soul and Kalani was kind of staring at each other because Soul saved her from something. But from that little distraction, Zarya speared Kalani through a barricade wall, got her in the ring, hit her finisher. 1, 2, 3, Zarya wins. I'm still on the boat of Zarya still potentially betraying Soul and potentially want to go against Soul for that championship now since she's champ. So I still kind of see that in the cards, but we'll see. We shall see. I'm kind of intrigued to see what Kalani goes for because with their making her this character she's been, I'm kind of intrigued to see where she goes, or could it be that she may be a potential call up? I don't think they announced when necessarily the next draft is going to be, but it kind of makes me wonder, should she is she going to be a potential call up? So because it kind of seems like she's floating a little bit, unless when it's all said and done with how the title picture goes, unless she's like, "Hey, I want a shot at the championship champion. Like I want a shot at the NXT Women's Championship. I've been Women's North American. Now I want, the NXT Women's Championship. So I don't know. I'm kind of intrigued to see where Kalani goes with all of this. Then we get a segment of Tony D and Wes back there talking, and Wes was like, "Oh, you don't have a family anymore, blah 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 blah." Later on, there was a segment with Wesley walking, talking to somebody on the phone, and then next week on NXT, we're gonna get Tony D versus Wes, and I'm pretty sure this is probably gonna set up Stacks versus Tony D at Battleground. I wouldn't be surprised if Stacks may come in, do some interference of some sorts, and eventually they're gonna book a match, Tony D and Stacks. Yeah, I 1000% see that. We see Stephanie back there talking, Stephanie Vakur talking back there with Lola Vice. And Lola was like, are you kind of excited about who's your opponent going to be? And then I want to say, did Julia walk? I think Julia had interrupted and was like, "Yeah, I ain't forget." And then, I'm gonna be your opponent come Battleground. And then, Lola was like, make no mistake, Stephanie, when you're done at Battleground, I'm trying to see you for that championship. And Stephanie was like, "All right, bet." Next up, the only reason why we get the image of the Rula Obafemi, because next up was the 25-man battle royal. We had, I'm gonna just say names. I don't fully remember everyone in there, but I'm pretty sure I can list the majority. But we had Trick Willie in there, Ethan Page was in there, Wesley, Tyson, and Tyreek. You had all three members of NQCC, which they did have a segment before, which they were saying, "Hey, one of us got to win," and I'm saying, represent for the NQCC. So you had all three members of Charlie, Miles, and Tavion in there. I think I said Ethan Page. You had Javon Evans. You had some people from LFG. You had Swipe Right from Evolve. You had Timothy Thatcher from Evolve. You had a few others, and then Pete went. Oh Lord! Shout out to Fallout Boy. Zachary Wentz from TNA was in there. We also get oh my God, he had a whole special entrance. Is this just not dawning on me? But the next entrance, the music goes. Oh, it was Ethan Page. I'm thinking of. The music goes out. We hear that guitar riff, and yes, TNA's Elijah, formerly known as WWE's Elias, comes out there, and he's in the battle. And this was actually a pretty exciting battle royal. Now, this is the one thing Ashley and I always gripe about with battle royals and Royal Rumbles. Why there is never any follow through. You throw a man or woman, in this case it was the men, you throw a man over the top rope, they land on the apron, and then the wrestler just walks off. You see, you did not fully launch said individual completely to the ground. Why there's never any follow through? Why? Why? Tell me why. There's never any follow through in battle royals or Royal Rumbles. So seriously, tell me why there's never, unless there are like pure eliminations of somebody getting clothesline or some apron spots. But for the most part, a person gets thrown over, the wrestler just kind of walks off, and the person just on the apron, and it's like, finish the job. I know Ridge Holland was in there, the Cullen was in there. Oh my God, he's one of the Sean Legacy from Evolve was in there. Like I said, I'm pretty sure if I really could buckle down, I could pretty much name everybody breaks and anymore. But I actually enjoyed the battle royal. I'm not gonna lie. Other than the whole, like I said, nobody follows through, because once again, I never understand that in battle royals and Royal Rumbles why there's never any follow through. It's almost brain breaking, but I get it. I got it. But the final four was Miles Bourne, Ethan Page, Sean Legacy, and Sean Spears. I was about to say, and after everything played out the way it played out, Miles Bourne gets the dub. And that happened because Sean Legacy was already eliminated. Spears was thrown over and he was hanging on the ropes. Page tried to throw out Miles. Miles reversed it, throws Page over where Spears is at. Page goes over, and in the process, he kind of grabs Spears into like a weird stunner cutter situation, and Miles Bourne gets the dub. And Charlie Dempsey did not look too happy at the fact that Miles gets the dub. Of course, Tavion and Ren was like, let's go. And to fast forward, there was a segment where they were celebrating, and Dempsey was like, yeah, after I take on Oba at Battleground. And he was like, what you mean you gonna take on Oba at Battleground? He was like, I won the Battle Royal. And Dempsey was like, I get it, but I'm the most qualified to go against Oba, so I think it should be me, And he said the most plausible line. He was like, yeah, with all that meat, I'm gonna take it and stretch it. And it was like, even you can even hear the crowd react. They was like, pause. And Oba walks up to congratulate Miles. And then, Dempsey was like, yeah, I'm the one. And then Oba was like, no, Miles won. And then Miles was like, well, Charlie, why don't you take on Oba next week so you can show me how it's done? He was like, what you said you was gonna stretch all that meat out and you was gonna stretch the meat head and da 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 da. And Oba was like, all right, bet. So next week we will get Oba versus Charlie Dempsey, but I see Charlie Dempsey unfortunately turning on Miles in the very, very, I ain't gonna say the near future at Battleground. It's just gonna be at Battleground. Next segment we get a Jordan Grace was getting interviewed about, her opportunity, and then Izzy Dane walks up talking about being the biggest and strongest, and then Lash comes up saying, I know we ain't talking about biggest and strongest when you ain't mentioning the bougie bully. And then Jordan was like, y'all ain't gotta worry, because once I win this championship, I'll come see y'all. We get the Jada versus Carmen Petrovich match. Jada gets the dub. I mean, yeah, and she was steady beating up on Carmen, and then when she was going for the hypnotic again, Thea Hale comes out, takes the hit, and then that's kind of where it ends. So I'm pretty sure at some point in the next couple of weeks we're going to get Jada and Thea Hale. Yeah. Joe Hendry was back there talking with Ava, and at Battleground it's going to be official. We're going to get Joe Hendry versus Trick Williams for the for the TNA championship, and Trick and Joe are supposed to have a contract signing next week. We get a segment of OTM because OTM, Lucian Price and Bronco Nima are finally back together, and they say, hey, we see the landscape of this tag division, and now we coming back to take it. So I wonder they're gonna go ahead and finally pull that trigger on giving Bronco and Lucian those tag titles in the near future. We shall see. Inamura and Briggs was having a moment, and Inamura was basically saying, Briggs, I've been letting you down. I'm sorry. This, that, and the third. And, I already talked to Ava and I'm going back to Japan. And Briggs was kind of left like, wait, what's going on? And, the Cullen, mainly Brooks, comes back and was like, maybe it wasn't your partners. Maybe it was always you, Briggs. And, Izzy kind of reiterated the same thing. So interesting there. Interesting. Chase U has a little segment where not Chase. Hale and Uriah are basically trying to update Andre Chase's fits, and it ended up being he's in a tracksuit, kind of almost like what Tony D used to wear when he first started wrestling. He was kind of in a tracksuit situation. He's in a Chase U tracksuit, and I guess that's what he's going to start teaching in. So, and possibly wrestling in. So, yeah. Main event time for number one contendership: Jordan Grace versus Julia. These two women went out there and was beating the hell out of each other. There was a slight scary moment where Jordan Grace did a move and Julia kind of landed on her head, but they was out there hitting each other. Slam, like they was out there having them a hard hitting ass duel. I don't think this was a match at this point. This was a duel. But ultimately, Jordan hits that beast bomb. 1, 2, 3. Jordan Grace is your new number one contender. And at Battleground, Jordan Grace versus Stephanie Vercoeur. And the show ended with Stephanie Vercoeur coming out and kind of, eye to eye, stare down. So more or less confirms the fact that, Julia and Roxanne are pretty much Raw bound because they've been on Raw for the past like 2-3 Raws. Because I want to say next week is going to be Julia and Roxanne versus Io and Rhea. So pretty much they've been on Raw almost since the Raw after Mania. They've been there. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is go ahead and the official call up now that Julia and Roxanne are officially on Raw. But that was NXT. Once again, Battleground looks clearer. We got Obafemi taking on Miles Bourne. We have Jordan Grace taking on Stephanie Vaquer. We have Trick Willie taking on Joe Hendry. And we'll see what else they have. Like I said, maybe we may get the Belly Bandits taking on Dark State. Maybe Ricky Saints might be in there somewhere. Maybe Kalani. If they pull the trigger possibly with not Kalani, sorry, Soul. If they possibly pull the trigger with Zarya turn on Soul, maybe we may get Zarya and Soul for the NXT Women's North American. So, but we got 3 matches so far. And it's shaping up to be a pretty interesting show for that weekend, because that weekend we are getting Saturday night's main event, of course, on Saturday. And then that Sunday night is NXT Battleground. And yes, if you are a wrestling fan outside of just WWE and NXT Battleground is on the same night as AEW's Double or Nothing. Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of that one myself, but hey, it is what it is. It is what it is. But pretty much that was NXT. Like I said, we're building towards Battleground and how that's gonna look. You know, I know some moving and shaking is gonna happen soon with the draft. I know some shakeups happen with the whole releases, which once again I'm about to make a companion video to where y'all can listen to my thoughts about that. But yeah, and whether you loved it or hated it, don't forget to rate it, thumbs up, thumbs down, like, share, comment, subscribe. After you subscribe, make sure you tag that notification bell so you can be notified for when we post videos on the channel. Shout outs to Lip Dizzle, Jaeger Bombastic, Juggernaut, and Kicking It with Leo. I will be defending my precious technical predictions championship this weekend at Backlash. So we'll see how that goes. But love one another, love yourself, take care of one another, and take care of yourself. And until next time, Tag Nation, do not forget to tag out. Peace.